Welcome to today's episode of Thrills and Bills, my podcast, Thrills and Bills. I'm your host, Caleb Christensen. I'm here with my good friend, Darnell Dickson of the Daily Herald. Darnell, how are you doing today?
Very good. Out in my backyard. Looks like I still need to do some work here.
Nothing like a little yard work, nothing wrong with
Yeah.
it. Today, I really just want to dive into kind of the state of college sports and athletics, and really how that's impacted high school sports. I know that you've been covering college and high school athletics for a long time. Right now, how do you feel college, mainly football and basketball, I feel like are really the at the head of the storm? How do you feel like they're kind of evolving as of the last few years?
Well, if anybody listens to me on Ben Priddle's radio show, they know that I'm a little bit apprehensive about the way things are headed in
Mm-hmm.
college sports, mainly because we already have professional sports. I like the separation between college and pro, and it seems that every day we move closer to a model where college sports is more like pro sports. And some things I think are probably good in that regard, and some things I don't think are very good. And so if you're a fan of college sports, you probably have to change the way maybe you view things a little bit in terms of who you cheer for and why you cheer for them. I feel like a lot of fans are looking at, they want their athletes to be loyal to their team, and loyalty is not the deciding factor really anymore in college sports. And I was never naive enough to think that it always was, but for a lot of people it was. And now that the motivation appears to be moving more towards the professional model, they may have to alter the way that they pick pro teams in certain ways that whoever's their favorite pro team to watch, it's not because of the same reasons they picked the favorite college team.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a lot of fans are going to have to take a look at that and decide how do I want to do my fandom in college? Do I pick it the same way just because I went to that school or the loyalty factor, or do I just pick them because I like their uniforms, or do I pick them because I like the fact they win championships and I'm a front runner? I mean, there's lots of different ways you can pick a
Yeah.
team, but the way that they do that, I think, is changing. So that's what I've seen, especially in the last 5 years or so. It's changed in college sports.
Yeah. I love that. I think that it is, yeah, it's difficult to find your team. I think that we're all kind of BYU fans around here because that's where a lot of us went to school. It's the closest school to us. But even the way that they're operating now is they're kind of buying into this more professional vibe, and it's all about money, and it's kind of tough to see. But let's take a step towards finances and NIL. And how do you feel? I know that especially at BYU, there we've seen it's like with Nick Emery's situation, it was NIL and kind of what went down with that. How do you feel like BYU has been navigating NIL? Do you feel like it's good? Do you feel like it's bad? Do you feel like we're far behind? What are your opinions there?
Well, I don't know how BYU intends to move forward. They certainly made a pretty bold statement when they hired Kevin Young as their new basketball coach,
Yeah.
and they're paying him market value, which they've never done before. So
Yeah.
that leads us to believe that maybe BYU is stepping forward, not only in that aspect of it, but in the NIL field as well. We know there are a lot of wealthy members of the LDS Church,
Yeah.
and that they support BYU sports, and so a lot you would expect some of that to filter up to the NIL, to where athletes are going to be getting paid more and to market value for them to compete. The problem that I have with NIL right now is there's no oversight,
Yeah.
and so it's just a race to the top and who can spend the most. And I feel like there needs to be some sort of rules involved to keep it fair. I mean, I know there's been some talk about breaking off and having, for college football, maybe 50 or 60 teams or 80 teams,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and cutting out a lot of those teams that are at the bottom. But there's a symbiotic relationship, I think, between the teams in the middle and the bottom and those at the top. And when
Yeah.
you get rid of that, it changes the dynamic quite to the
Mm-hmm.
point where I'm not even sure I recognize it as college sports. Again, back to the pro model. So um, I'm not against athletes making money. I think it's good. I think they've earned it. I think um, athletes have more control over um, their college career than they used to, not only financially, but being able to move freely from school to school. I remember it didn't seem that long ago that anyone who transferred there was a stigma attached to, well, there must have been a problem there. And
Yeah.
now you're regularly seeing guys who've transferred 3, 4 times,
Yeah.
and they're getting places to go. So that's been removed, and the freedom of movement things probably a little bit on the side that I'm a little uncomfortable with it. But I think it's good that athletes have a little more control of that. But when you don't put any rules in place, there's always going to be people that take advantage of those rules. My dad was a PE teacher, and he made kids wear PE issue,
Yeah.
and kids complained about it. He said, the second I let one kid wear raggedy shorts to practice or to PE, the next day 12 kids are doing that, or a
Yeah.
girl's wearing something inappropriate, or whatever it happens to be. So people will take advantage if there's no rules, and I think there needs to be more rules in place. So I don't want people to think I'm anti-athletes making money. I think it's great they're having an opportunity to do that. They should. But when you don't put any rules in place, it becomes very difficult to navigate, not only for those who want to donate money, but for the athletes themselves. They need to have some guidance in how this all works and how it affects them and how they handle it.
Yeah. I know that Dartmouth, I believe, over on the East Coast, Ivy League, is that their basketball team sort of unionized. And now we've seen a few states so far kind of change their legislation with the NCAA to allow this model where athletes can be university employees. Do you feel like that should be nationwide, NCAA wide? How do you feel like we should navigate that?
Well, there's a couple of things with that. One reason I like it is because it would provide some structure and would provide some rules and some oversight. The problem is, who do you get to do that? The NCAA has proven to be not very good at anything other than putting on tournaments.
Yeah.
So you have to find some way to make that work and someone to head that up. I feel like it's moving toward that model
Hmm.
where athletes will be employees. I think athletes would appreciate that structure too, because it would give them some way to kind of navigate this ever changing world of NIL and transfer. So I like it in some ways, but in other ways, I know that a lot of people are anti-government when it comes to somebody taking charge of this. They don't want the government in charge. The NCAA is proven inept, so I'm not sure who you put in charge of it, but I think it's probably moving towards that.
Yeah. And in terms of the portal and NIL and everything like that, how do you feel like that has impacted high school recruiting in the last year or so?
Yeah, I've talked to some high school coaches who have high level players who are starting to see that trickle down,
Yeah.
and a lot of it has to do with some of the um, what do they call they're high schools that basically are just athletic farms,
Yeah.
academies and things like that. I guess you can call them, where they will offer kids money to come play sports for them there. And again, that's starting to tamper with how we view high school sports and you know, obviously people that went to high school at Pleasant Grove, they want to see Pleasant Grove do well and they like their athletes to stay there. And I don't like high school kids moving around a lot.
Yeah.
I know there's reasons why they might have to sometimes, but it never seemed fair to me. I like an example. There was an athlete at my son's school. Um, he transferred from his school to another school at his senior year. And so you've got all these kids that have been playing together and a kid that's worked in the program and gone to all the things, and he's a starter. All of a sudden, he's not a starter now because someone else moved in
Yeah.
and is a really good player. So I like to keep the fairness at the high school level, and I don't like to see the things that are affecting college sports affect high school in that way. But it seems like it's probably inevitable that it will happen that way
Yeah.
at some level.
I know that we're kind of seeing a lack of high school players receiving scholarship offers because these
Yeah.
scholarships are almost being withheld and divvied out to transfer players instead. How do you feel like that's going to impact the way that larger schools recruit, whether we're going to see almost like G5s, then you just start feeding schools and you're just in like a pyramid of G5s and mid majors and big time schools and you're just climbing up the ranks as a high school athlete.
Yeah, beyond the 5 and 4 star athletes, I think there's a lot of 3 and 2 star athletes that are not getting those scholarship offers they used to. And those guys are the backbone of your. If you're a football team, they're obviously you get a lot worse places than basketball, but
Yeah.
they're the backbone of your program. They're the guys that are they're grinding every day and working to improve. And just because they start off as a 2 or 3 star doesn't mean they finish as a 2 or 3 star. We've seen that a lot,
Yeah.
um, at all levels. So I hope that there's a way around this. I think, the junior college route might be picking up a few extra players that didn't used to. Some of the smaller schools, NAIA, Division II, Division III, maybe those are becoming more of an option for some of those athletes. But yeah, certainly no one likes dwindling offers or opportunities for high
Yeah.
school athletes. As much time and effort and money as they spend to get to that point, and there seems to be fewer and fewer opportunities, because if you're a coach and you're trying to win ball games, do you go with a freshman who is untested or a guy who's played 2 or 3 years of college basketball?
Hmm.
I mean, it's a no-brainer that you take the person with experience. So it is difficult for those high school kids to know what to do and where to go, and they're getting advice. And if you're a 5 star, you're always going to be able to find a
Yeah.
place. If you're a 4 star, but the ones below that are athletes that need those opportunities because they have something to prove, and that's a little bit different approach than if you're a 5 star and expecting to
Yeah.
walk right in and start.
Yeah. Do you feel, kind of to swing back to college sports, do you feel like there should be a similar model in terms of like transferring and taking new jobs in terms of head coaches in coaching positions? I know at BYU we just saw Mark Pope kind of leave, and now players are
Yeah,
leaving. And if there was a model that you have to honor your contract to some further extent as a coach, do you feel like that would fix things, or would that make things worse?
I don't think you'd ever be able to push that across. I just think there'd be too many legal issues involved there with restraint of trade or however you want to term it.
Yeah.
Um, any coach who takes a better job, I mean, that's kind of what they're in it for, is to get the most out of their coaching career. And I know BYU fans, they liked what Mark Pope was doing, and then he leaves for Kentucky and doesn't say goodbye, and they get a little bent out of shape. But Mark Pope was doing what was best for he and his family and
Yeah.
for his career. And you can't keep people from doing that. I suppose the same applies to athletes, that you can't restrain them from doing what's best for them. But the difference, I think, in a lot of cases, is that the athletes aren't grown adults yet. They're still
Yeah.
learning, they're forming their opinions and their belief system, and and their morals, and all those things.
Yeah.
Where it was an adult, you think has already gone through that a bunch of times, and they're able to make those decisions. And
Mhm.
and so I just don't want kids being hurt by those decisions.
Yeah.
And if it's always seems like it's better over the horizon, it might not be. And then you put yourself. I know we had uh, Dale Murphy's son was a tight end at Utah, and
Yeah.
we had him on as a guest, Jake, and he said he wouldn't be the man he is today without the adversity that he faced as a freshman and a sophomore when he wasn't starting when he thought he should be.
Yeah.
Like, he stayed at Utah and he fought through that and got to the point where he became a starter. And he knows that experience is valuable. If you don't have any adversity, or when you face adversity, you go someplace else and start again, you're missing out on those lessons. And so making those decisions is difficult for college kids, I think.
Yeah. I think an interesting thing with that, because I do agree with you in that sticking it out, I feel like does build, makes you a little bit stronger, I think. And I think that the network that you can gain and the experience you have when you stay places is great for you. But Keaton Slovis came on Ben Criddle's show a few weeks ago, and he talked about how college scouts liked the fact that he had transferred and been in different locker rooms and adapted to different offenses. Do you feel like in all cases that's a good thing, or do you feel like that's more quarterback specific? How do you feel about that?
I think it'd be specific to the athlete and the reasons why they left.
Yeah.
We never did really know why Keaton Slovis left Pitt. We know it wasn't an effective partnership between he and the coaching staff. I think he'd had a couple of different offensive coordinators, so you kind of see him looking for a little stability in that situation. And I don't think you can color all those situations the same. I think it's different for every athlete as they look at what their options are and how they want to handle things. With Keaton, it seemed like, as you said, as a quarterback, to be able to say, I've been in three different places and adapted to three different systems, a scout would say, yeah, that's good that you can adapt and learn those kind of things. So in some instances, it probably is a good thing. But, if you're, there's lots of reasons, but if you're chasing the money from place to place, I don't know that experience is helpful to try to adapt differently every place you go.
Yeah. Do you feel like there should be like you kind of touched on this earlier, like a salary cap, something that's kind of limiting, I guess maybe not limiting potential, but say as an athlete, you can only make so much. I know that last year we saw Arch Manning down at Texas who didn't play. He made half a million dollars more than Brock Purdy did, who played in the Super Bowl. Do you feel like is it even ethical to limit potential earnings? Like if you're Arch Manning, you're just worth that much money, and if you're Caleb Christensen, you're not. Or how do you feel about that?
It's so difficult. I remember thinking about this when I was a young kid and I was getting Sports Illustrated and Inside Sports and
Yeah,
Football Digest sent to my house, and I was reading about these salaries that were going to the rookies, and I kept thinking they haven't done anything yet. Why are you paying them all this money?
yeah,
It should be performance based, and so much of it's not. And part of what I see as a sort of a kickback from some of that might be that some of those making investment in NIL might be a little less likely to do so when they don't get any return on that investment. If they invest $1 million in a freshman and he doesn't play or he ends up transferring, why would they do it again? They didn't get anything out of it. So um, I think it should be more performance based than potential based.
yeah.
But I don't know how you do that. I'm not smart enough to figure out a way to do it. I
Neither
just
am I.
know the way that they're headed right now doesn't seem to be the right way.
Yeah. No, I agree. In terms of performance based, I know that there's a lot of discrepancies between men's and women's athletics. Also something that you covered for a long time. How do you feel like, let's say that they implement university employees, how do you feel like money should be distributed? Do you feel like it should be more even? Do you feel like there should be a base rate? Is it all performance based? And so some people are making a lot, some people are making none. Team to team, how would you implement that?
Probably it would be based on team performance.
Yeah.
Um, because I still think those opportunities for other athletes should be there for tennis and golf and women's sports that don't bring in a lot of revenue.
Yeah.
But there are, women's volleyball sells out the Smith Fieldhouse almost every
Yeah.
night they play.
Yeah.
Women's soccer does the same thing in South Field, so they would probably deserve more than the tennis or golf or some of those other that aren't really spectator sports as much. It'd take a really smart person to figure all that out, but it seems more fair that way.
Yeah.
That the football team, they have 80 scholarships, whereas teams that are smaller, like men's volleyball, only has like 3.5 or 4 scholarships
Yeah. Hmm.
for the entire team, based on how much money that they can generate probably for the university. So I think you kind of follow along those lines a little bit
Yeah.
because men's volleyball does really well as far as putting butts in the seats in the Smith Fieldhouse, and so they deserve to be get their cut of that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think there's a way to make it fair, but it doesn't need to be even. I don't think because that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. No, I agree. And just to close, do you have anything else to add on your takes on the current state of college athletics?
Well, I feel like there's still a lot of interest. There were more uh, viewers for the women's national championship basketball game than for the men's for the first time
Yeah.
ever.
Hmm.
And so there's an interest level there that needs to be capitalized on. Um, I enjoy from the beginning of September until beginning of December because it's about football.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the off season less and less because there's just so
Yeah.
much else going on. I
Yeah.
mean, it is kind of intriguing to figure out maybe how Kevin Young's going to build a roster when guys
Yeah.
are leaving. Those things are kind of interesting, but I I want there to be more focus on the games and the outcomes, and that's more fun for me to talk about um, than seeing what I view as college football legacy being kind of eroded away by in certain ways. I hope they are able to maintain and keep some of that that's made college sports special for so long.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, thank you for hopping on today and thank you for your perspective. Double D, Darnell Dickson of the Daily Herald. Thank you for coming on at Throws and Bills. Tune in for more.
Great to be here.